This is the Bethune-Cookman University Wildcat News Feed on Sirius XM, radio channel 142. HBCU, broadcasting from the Wildcat Lab in Daytona Beach, Florida. WELE 1380, The Cat. It's time to hear the good news from BCU.
Good afternoon and Happy New Year to all of our Wildcat Newsfeed and hashtag BCU Talk Tuesday listeners. We missed you over the holidays, but we are glad to be back. We hope that many of you all enjoyed food, friendship, family, and fun over the holiday season. Today we are talking about the $130,000 grant that BCU Archives received from the Institute of Museum and Library Services. For those of you who don't know, right up the street from the most famous beach in the world is the historical landmark of Bethune-Cookman University, which is home to Dr. Bethune's own personal home and gravesite, as well as numerous different archives that document some of the world's most profound Black history, scratch that, overall historical moments that Dr. Bethune has had a front row seat at. Here to tell us more about the $130,000 grant, the BCU Archives, and what it's like to oversee such historical information is Dr. Ashley Preston. Welcome, Dr. Preston.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. We are so glad to have you in the studio today. Now, I know there are many people listening who work at an HBCU, might work in archives, but getting a $130,000 grant is probably something that would even blow their mind. So tell us, what will the grant allow you to do?
So this is actually our second grant. The first one was for $135,000, and we actually did a curatorial fellowship for 2 years, and we hired a young lady who's actually an alum of Bethune-Cookman University, and she was a history major, and we hired her to work in the foundation and also to work in the archives. And so over those last 2 years, she has really gained a lot of experience as a museum professional. She also finished her master's in library science during that time, and she's really helped us to really bring the archives and the foundation into the 21st century with some of the techniques that she brought also as a young professional. And so this grant is pretty much a continuation of that project. We found that a lot of the work that she did in the archives, we wanted to continue that archival work. And so in continuing that work, this grant was written to hire an archivist. And she is the archivist that we hired, and also to establish a history internship program. And so that internship program is open to BCU students and primarily history majors to encourage more African Americans to go into the field of museum and archives.
Now, you mentioned that when you initially brought her on, that she developed techniques to help take you all into the 21st century. Can you tell us about some of those techniques?
Well, the archives, we hadn't had a professional archivist in about 30 years. And so with her coming, we were able to establish a volunteer program for the archives. We were also able to open the archives up more. So now we have a regular schedule in which people who are doing research can come to the archives and do that research, because prior to that, we didn't have a full-time person in the archives. It was kind of like a dark place. If somebody needed something, I, myself, or Dr. Yeomans, my boss, who's the dean of the library, or one of the library staff would kind of just go in the archives and find it, and kind of we would rush out because, you know, we already have a lot of things to do. And so this put somebody solely in the archives so that we could open it up.
Now, speaking of archivists, how can someone tell if that would be a good career focus for them?
If you like organization, if you like historical documents, if you love history, I started as an archives technician in grad school, and it was a lot of fun. I mean, you really get to go into work every day and do research also. So if you like research and finding new things, it's almost like investigative work in a sense, because you never know what you're going to find. I mean, we have charters from the beginning of the school. We have found that there were various names to the school in the early years. And so it's just like a treasure chest kind of for us.
Now, I can imagine the excitement you felt when you first got the news about the grant. When did you learn you received the grant, and walk us through that moment?
The grant, I think it was about August or so that we found out we'd gotten the grant. And it was written December of 2016. And it was interesting because I actually struggled with writing this grant because grant writing is a lot of work. Generally, grant writing is a separate job within itself. And so in the summer, it was just kind of unexpected. I don't know why I didn't think that we could get it again. I guess because we just had that grant. And so I was extremely grateful for that resource because it's really going to save the university a lot of money, and also it's going to give a young professional an opportunity to really jumpstart her career.
Now, the grant allowed you to bring on the new archivist, among other things. What is the purpose of an archivist, and what will their job consist of at the foundation?
So two things. We have the Bethune Foundation, and that's a National Historic Landmark. That's Mrs. Bethune's actual house. It's where she lived from 1914 until she passed away in 1955. And in 1953, she started the Bethune Foundation in the house. So that's how the house became known as the foundation. At that time, the purpose of the foundation was to funnel scholarship funds back into the school. Also, she opened it up so that people could come visit her as early as 1953. So it was a museum even then while she was still living in the house. And the last thing that she was working on before she passed away was creating an archive within her house. And so where my office is was actually the original archive space that she was working on building when she passed away. So over the years, all of her personal papers that were supposed to be in the archive in the foundation have now been placed in the library. So that's where the archive is now. And those papers have also been digitized and are available in various archives throughout the United States. I'm sorry, what was your question again? I was trying to make the difference between the two.
That was great, and that was really helpful because I had that question later on, is what's the purpose of an archivist, and what does their job consist of at the foundation? And I think you were separating the difference between the foundation and the archives.
So the role of the archivist is to preserve everything that is in the archives. So all of the personal papers that we have of Mrs. Bethune, also the papers that we have that document the history of the university. Her job is to find out the best way to preserve those papers, also to work with researchers who are coming in, who are interested in doing research on Mary McLeod Bethune or Bethune-Cookman University, and also to assist the university in its keeping of the history of Bethune-Cookman.
Now, you mentioned at the beginning that the Bethune Foundation was initially established to funnel scholarships to students. Does it still have that purpose today?
No, that purpose, I think the purpose of the foundation, it kind of changed when Mrs. Bethune passed away, because at that time, the foundation was kind of like her baby. And so it was something that she established separate from the university. But over the years, the university kind of took over the foundation so that it could help to preserve the foundation.
Now, someone who is surrounded by history on a daily basis, I'm sure this is going to be a very difficult question. Can you tell me what are the two most memorable archives that you've come across since working at BCU? Or three, if need be.
I would just say that I won't say it's not in the archives, it's actually in the foundation, but my favorite thing is Miss Bethune's dress, the black dress that we have. The black dress, we actually just sent it to the Smithsonian, but I've seen her in pictures wearing that dress for years. When I was a student at Howard and I was working on my dissertation, I worked in the archives in DC, and I would see pictures of her, and many of those pictures when she's receiving her award from Haiti, I think one of the pictures of her at the United Nations, she has on this infamous black dress. So when I came here and I was actually able to see that dress, it was like, oh, that's the dress. And so I think that's probably my favorite thing. And the second thing is just the letters that she wrote, seeing her signature and also seeing the language. She's very proper, and it's kind of funny because some of the letters are kind of shady, but because her language is so proper, you can see her saying something, but she says it in a way that you have to kind of catch what she's saying. So the letters and the dress.
Now, are you in the house when people stop by that are just touring Daytona Beach that want to see her home and want to see her gravesite? Are you there when they stop by?
Yes.
What would you say is the one fact about Dr. Bethune that most people are shocked about or that they don't know? Like what you said about the letters was like an aha moment to me, like how eloquent she was, but she said what she meant and she meant what she said.
Yeah. One thing that people don't know, I think a lot of people don't know how well traveled Mrs. Bethune was. She went to Cuba, Haiti, Liberia. I mean, she was very much an international figure also. And I think that's one of the things that has kind of been overlooked. People seem to confine her to either Washington, D.C. or Florida.
That's right. The house, $1.50, and having a relationship with several presidents. Absolutely.
Right. That's about it.
Are there any archives in the house that represent like where she traveled to? Did she bring a lot of souvenirs, bag, plates, anything like that?
We have a bracelet of hers that she received from her, I think it was her son from Africa. We have the Haitian Medal of Honor and Merit, which was Haiti's highest award, which she was given in 1949. We also have her passport from 1927 when she went to Europe, which was her first international trip. And I'm trying to think, it's so much stuff in there. So we have quite a few things. And what's not in the house is in the archives.
Now, you all really have gemstones in the house, in the foundation, in the archives. Do you all ever have people that reach out to you or foundations that reach out to you that want to purchase some of her belongings or want to, allow them in their museum or anything of that nature?
Not purchase, but more so loan. We did a not a traveling exhibit, but we did do an exhibit last year at the New Smyrna Museum of History. And we actually put some of her items in their museum, and we did a whole display there. And afterwards, in February, some of their museum members actually came to the foundation for a tour. It was like 60 of them. So we do loan out items sometimes. And as I said earlier, her dress is currently on loan also.
I'll have to stop by and see that when it gets back, because the way you just told that story, like I can only imagine how
it's
great
beautiful.
that was for you to like walk in and be like, oh my goodness, that is the dress. Now, Dr. Preston, your history and love for Dr. Bethune began well before you came to Daytona Beach. And I could see that from reading your bio. Can you tell us that story and why you love the life and legacy of Dr. Bethune so much?
When I was in my first year at Howard working on my doctoral degree, one of my professors, Dr. Elizabeth Clark Lewis, came into our class, and she talked to us about public history, and she talked about museums and archives. And the one thing that I heard her say was jobs. So I changed my minor to public history, and she became my advisor, and she encouraged me to go volunteer at the Mary McLeod Bethune Council House in Washington, D.C. And so I went and volunteered there. I gave tours in the house, and I also worked in the archives there. And it was during that time that my dissertation topic, I really found my topic, which I focused on Mrs. Bethune's international activism. And so I think just working in her home and telling her story daily and working with researchers who were coming in to learn more about her life, that's really where I fell in love with Mrs. Bethune's story. And I think one of the things about her story is that it kind of resonated with me because she's from a small area. She's from Maysville, South Carolina. I'm from North Carolina. And she saw education as her way out, as the way that she would become successful. And for me, education has always been extremely important. And so her story, it just kind of spoke to me. And just telling her story every day, you know, it was just a great experience.
Now, I understand that they are lobbying or trying to get Dr. Bethune's statue to be put in D.C. Do you have any part in that? And if so, what is your part in helping that come to pass?
My part has been just speaking up for why Mrs. Bethune's statue should be there. In December, I was actually given an opportunity to speak on NPR, the radio station, about why her statue should be there, and just informing and enlightening people on her importance and the role that she's played in Florida state history specifically. And so I've just been an advocate and really just spreading the news about how important Mrs. Bethune is, because Florida, I think Floridians have her story has kind of been placed into a box. And I think a lot of people are not realizing how big her story is and how many people she touched and the impact that she had on Florida. I mean, she's not from Florida, she's from South Carolina, but this is where she raised her children, or her son. This is where she established Bethune-Cookman University. It's where she established her roots as an organizer, as an activist, and as a women's rights activist. And so she has a really special place in Florida. And for me, I just felt that it was time for Florida to get on the right side of history, because if this statue is placed in the Capitol, she would actually be the first African-American woman to be there. And so Florida has a chance to really make history.
Is there a deadline for when they will decide who actually gets to represent the state of Florida?
I believe it's in the next couple of months.
Okay. Now, what makes BCU's archives so special? Because it really seems to stand out. Like, I almost want to ask you, how many people do you see on a monthly basis that just come up and say, hey, we want to see Dr. Bethune's house? And other HBCUs and other colleges have archives, but it doesn't seem to attract the type of attention that ours does.
Well, the archives, the significance of it really relates to Mrs. Bethune and the role that she played in history. A lot of people don't realize that at the height of her career, she was known as First Lady of Negro America. And so she was like Oprah, the Oprah of her time period. When she was younger, she really was mentored by Booker T. Washington. And at the time, he was like the Oprah of his time period. And so he kind of passed the torch to Mrs. Bethune, and she was well known and well respected. And for the most part, the archives just tells her story, and it also tells the story of how she successfully established an institution that is still around and still thriving. Many people established institutions during their lifetime, but not all of them have surpassed their lives.
That's good. I've heard that you all have a relationship with the Smithsonian, and that opened the door for some really great things. Can you tell our audience a little bit more about that?
We have a partnership with the Smithsonian that allowed us to have a HBCU internship. Last year we had an internship through them. And also we have loaned her dress, her infamous black dress, to the Smithsonian. So if you do visit the Smithsonian, specifically the National Museum of African American History and Culture, you will be able to see her dress in her exhibit.
Now, how many people would you say that you see a month that aren't students, staff, or faculty that come in and they're like, hey, can we just get a tour?
Hundreds. In the first year that I was there, I started in 2013, we had about 7,500 visitors that year. And so that's usually where our numbers are, about 7,500, 8,000.
And what is your engagement like with historians and archivists outside of Bethune-Cookman University? Is it a large network of you all, or is it pretty separated?
There are a number of museum specialists. Florida actually has a great network. It's called the Florida African American Preservation Heritage Network. We call it FAPN. And that's all of the African American museums in the state of Florida. And they meet yearly. There are conferences, there are conference calls. And so the museum community is very well connected, and there are a lot of folks, but we need more.
Now, I asked about Dr. Bethune earlier, but can you share with us 2 fun facts about her house that people may not know? Something she has in there, or it can be just about what the campus holds in terms of history that people don't know a lot about.
2 fun facts. One of her favorite meals was smothered chicken wings and grits.
Wow.
She liked food. And also, one of the fun facts about the house is huge. It has 4 bedrooms. When you're on the outside of the house, you can't really tell how big the house actually is. And it's just a huge house, and it was actually referred to as the Bethune Mansion back in the day. And fun fact, she was the first person in the Black community to get her electric and plumbing.
Wow. Now, is there a goal for the Bethune Foundation or the archives in 5 years? Where would you like to see it on a global platform?
I would like to see us do more research. I think that there is a great need for more academic research on Mrs. Bethune's life. My book, Mary McLeod Bethune in Florida, and Mary McLeod Bethune in Washington, D.C. by Dr. Ida Jones, and Building a Better World, those are just about the only 3 books that are dedicated solely to the life of Mrs. Bethune. And so I would like to see more research being published by the foundation and by the university on Mrs. Bethune's life, because she is really just a powerful figure. And I think that publishing more work would really inspire people.
Now, if someone is interested in taking a tour, what should they do, or who should they contact?
They should come to the foundation. We have walk-ins, so you don't have to set an appointment. And we're open Monday through Friday from 10 to 3. We try to start our last tour no later than about 2:30, only because we want to make sure that you have time to ask questions, and we want you to really be able to see the house. And we do appointments on Saturdays.
Okay, great. Now, closing this out, because you are a woman that kind of initiated this grant and making it possible to further Dr. Bethune's impact and the visibility of her impact, what does your job look like on a daily basis for anyone that's interested in possibly doing what you do?
My job is interesting. I teach, so I'm teaching museum studies this semester, which is going good. Today was our first class. I also work on grants. I write large grants like the IMLS grant, but I also write smaller grants like the one that we were just awarded from the Methodist Church, which is about $1,000. I also run our social media, Facebook and our Instagram page. I give tours. I also train students on how to give tours and volunteers. And I also work with the archives, and I do research on Mrs. Bethune and answer any requests that the university has about Mrs. Bethune, and just anything that they need, and make sure that we're delivering accurate information on her life.
Wow. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Preston, for stopping by the studio to tell us more about the grant that was received and the great work that's being done through the Foundation House as well as the archives. Thank you all so much for listening in today to the Wildcat Newsfeed, also known as #TalkTuesday, the place where you get the real, raw, and relevant facts about what's going down on the campus of Bethune-Cookman University. See you next week.